Life and the myth of Mata Hari, the spy who invented the striptease and became a legend. Prostitute, yes, but never a traitor. At dawn on October 15, 1917, on the outskirts of Paris, a rifle platoon killed the life of Margaret Selle, convicted of espionage against France. Her role as a double agent, the character she made of herself to seduce military and powerful people, and the documents that reveal how they transformed her into an expiatory snitch. Perhaps for her death in front of a rifle platoon, perhaps for her fame as an exotic dancer, or innovatively erotic and courteous of unharmed sexual life, the woman known as Mata Hari became a legend within the world of espionage and works almost as a synonym for a spy woman. Her name shines much more than that of great spies like Virginia Hall, Africa de los Eros, Noreen Ayed Khan, or the master of British espionage Barat Kynes, although her achievements, if she really had them beyond the myth, are infinitely smaller. The last minutes of her life, the early morning of October 15, 1917, when she faced the mouths of the rifles of 12 French soldiers, have been told in 100 different ways, all of them novelistic. Her transfer, elegantly dressed in makeup, in a dark car from the prison of Saint Lazare, to the place of her execution. Her refusal to be blindfolded. The challenging kiss she threw at her executors before being tied to the post, and after having unbuttoned the front buttons of her blouse in a last striptease are some of the supposed gestures that helped build that story. The versions are contradictory. A second-hand chronicle in the American newspaper The New Yorker says that she faced death dressed in an elegant Amazonian-sized suit, especially made for the occasion, and a pair of white gloves, while a French newspaper describes her with a blouse covered and touched with a tricorneal hat chosen by her accusers to be worn at the trial, and that it was the only complete and clean outfit she had in prison. Perhaps the most reliable account of the moment of her death is that of the British journalist Henry Vallès, witness of the shooting, written many years after that early morning of October on the outskirts of Paris. He says that after hearing the shots, Mata Hari was falling slowly, inert. He settled on his knees, with his head always up and without the slightest change of expression on his face. For a fraction of a second he seemed to stumble there, on his knees, looking directly at those who had taken his life. Then he fell backwards, bending his waist, with his legs bent under her. A sub-officer approached his body, pulled out his revolver and shot him in the head to make sure she was dead. That same day the legend was born that built her as a great spy, which grew bigger over time and gave rise to countless books and movies. Only a century later, with the declassification of a series of secret documents, the truth was known. Mata Hari was not the fatal spy who paints the myth and never revealed strategic information to the Germans, but mere gossips and stories of the intimate life of some French officers. Those documents also show that he was actually a double agent, in the service of French and Germans of little importance, and that his execution was mainly due to the fact that France needed a spy to cover up its military failures. Mata Hari always held that he had not given the Germans any information of value despite the offer they made him because he would have considered it a betrayal of France, his country of adoption. The legend goes that during the trial he defended himself with this phrase, "A prostitute? Yes, but a traitor? Never," he said. It did him no good, because he was the ideal victim for the French army. His reputation as a fatal woman and exotic dancer guaranteed publicity. An image that hid the true story of a suffering woman who had to make her way in life alone and overcoming countless pains and obstacles. The life of Margarita. Her name was actually Margarita Gertrude Seele, and she was born in the Netherlands on August 7, 1876. She had to leave high school because of a confusing fact. Some versions claim that she was a lover of the school principal. Others, on the other hand, claimed that her parents took her out of the classrooms because she was a victim of harassment. After that, she left the paternal home to go live with her godfather, where she did not have a good time either. Maybe that's why, at 18, desperate to escape, she responded to an ad published in a newspaper by Captain Rudolph MacLeod. He said, an officer assigned to the Dutch East Indies would like to find a lady of good character for marriage purposes. The notice was actually a joke from a friend of the military, but MacLeod liked Margarita. They committed themselves a week after meeting and got married in July 1895. The captain was destined for Java, in present-day Indonesia, so shortly after the couple moved there. It seemed like a place of paradise, but for Margarita it became a hell in which she was trapped, preyed on by an alcoholic and beating husband who deceived her in front of everyone. They had 2 children, Norman and Jean, but the man died when he was 2 years old, allegedly poisoned by one of the servants of the house. They returned to Europe in 1902 and the marriage ended up coming to an end when Margarita was diagnosed with a syphilis that could only have infected her husband, whom she had remained faithful to until then. The divorce left her alone and on her own, because MacLeod got custody of her daughter, denied her the possibility of even visiting her, and also kept all her family property. Margarita had to find a way to make a living. Eye of the Sun. During her stay in Java, Margarita had learned to dance local dances and also some of the Javanese culture. With those two elements, she decided to create a character, Mata Hari, Eye of the Sun, in Malayo, a princess from Java who had arrived for mysterious reasons to Paris. My mother, Glorious Valadera of the Temple of Kandaswani, died at 14 years old, the day of my birth. The priests adopted me and put Mata Hari on me, which means Eye of the Sun. It had a presentation mode. She started working in a circus, where she amazed the public with alleged sacred dances of Hinduism, which were actually erotic dances of her own invention. Her fame soon transcended the tent of the circus and led her to perform in theaters and be hired at private parties. She performed as an exotic dancer, but the true attraction of her dances was that little by little she was taking off her clothes until she was almost naked. When she finished, her only garment was a petticoat that covered her breasts. An unpublished audacity for the time. In one way or another, she invented the striptease as a form of dance. We have her album in the exhibition, and there are lots of cuts from newspapers and photographs. She was a celebrity, describes her Hans Greneweg, curator of the Fries Museum, in L.A. Warden, the birthplace of Mata Hari. She made a very good living with those dances, whose income added to the payments and gifts she began to receive from her lovers, almost all rich businessmen and military men related to the French political power. She was in that when World War I broke out. Double agent. Mata Hari lived in Paris, but he gave presentations in different countries in Europe, something he could continue to do despite the end of the war for being a citizen of a neutral country. It was her fame as a dancer, her access to military and characters of power, and that freedom to move freely in different countries that put her in the spying services of the nations faced in the war. The first to contact her were the Germans and shortly after the French. Mata Hari agreed to work for both. Here the versions that ran for years are contradictory. Some say that the dancer began to work for the French without informing them that the Germans had contacted her. Others assure that the French intelligence was aware and that he used her as a double agent. It all started in 1914, when she was acting in Berlin and was a lover of the city police chief, who contacted her with Eugen Kramer, a high German intelligence chief. Thus he became Agent H-21 of the Prussian forces. When she returned to Paris, she was summoned by Captain Georges Ladaux, officer of the French counterespionage, who ordered him to seduce and spy on the German ambassador in Madrid to obtain information. From there, he multiplied the missions for one and the other, although the declassified documents reveal that he rarely obtained relevant information. Instead, the reports detail his movements step by step. In June 1916, he established relations with the military of all the nationalities that were passing through Paris. Thus, on the 12th he had lunch with Lieutenant Ajor. From the 15th to the 18th he lived with the Belgian commander of Beaufort. On the 30th he slept with the commander of Montenegro, Jobalchevic. On the 3rd of July he went to bed first with Lieutenant Gasfield and then with Captain Maslov. On the 4th of July with Italian Captain Mariani, and on the 16th with the Irish officers Plunkett and Brienne, including one of them. In January 1917 the French intelligence intercepted a message from Germany that gave data from Agent H-21, revealing his identity. Apparently it was a maneuver by the Germans that sought to generate confusion and distract the French, delivering an agent who was no longer useful to them. But if the French intelligence realized it, it did not prove it. They also needed a spying chip to counteract the defeats they had been suffering. Trial and execution. Margaretha Gertrude Aseel was arrested on February 12, 1917 by the Duxim Bureau, the French intelligence service, which presented her as a spy and traitor. From then on, a theatrical montage was developed to build the spying chip that France needed to justify its losses in the war. When the war was arrested, it was going very badly for the French and she was very attractive, had relations with everyone and lived with ostentation, while the Parisians did not have bread. There was a lot of resentment against her, explains Pat Zipman, author of a minor biography of Mata Hari. During the trial, the intelligence agents dismantled the story of Princess Java, but used it conveniently as proof that it was a woman who had lived from deception. None of her lovers intervened to save her and she was sentenced to death, accused of having caused the death of more than 50,000 soldiers with her alleged espionage. It was an irregular process in which her defense rights were not guaranteed and evidence was presented manufactured by the French intelligence itself. Sentenced to death, the early morning of October 15, 1917, she was taken from the Saint-Lazare prison in Château de Vincennes, on the outskirts of Paris, where she was executed. No one claimed her corpse, which was delivered to the Paris School of Medicine, where it was used in dissection classes. Her head was preserved in the Museum of Anatomy, where it mysteriously disappeared years later. It is presumed that it was stolen by a collector. By then, Mata Hari was a legend of the world espionage behind which the woman of flesh and blood had disappeared. The one that her biographer Zipman describes as well, was a woman who became herself, who created herself. She made herself someone she was not, and she did it brilliantly. She was very good at dancing, acting as a courtesan, and had no repairs in relation to sex. All her lovers were happy.